Welcome back to On the Tape. We have a very special segment.
Yeah,
here,
we do.
And we just kind of came up with this out of nowhere.
No, that's not true. He's been hounding us for like 6 months.
That's not true.
And that's where Stephen's. All right, so you're hearing that's Stephen Rehfuss. Stephen Rehfuss joined the RiskReversal Media team. What, close to 2 years ago, Stephen?
In the fall of 21.
Stephen is a proud graduate of Syracuse University, which is a university that's near and dear to my heart, the way Georgetown University is near and dear to your heart.
That would be true. And Syracuse, of course, one of the great lacrosse schools in the United States. Jim Brown, who recently passed away. Some say Jim Brown was a better lacrosse player than he was a football player. We'll let Stephen talk about that, but Stephen Rehfuss is here.
Yeah, he is here. And here's the deal, why it's near and dear to my heart, because my mom went to Syracuse University. My dad graduated in 64. My mom graduated in 65. They met there, okay? Now, lacrosse was one of the things I can honestly tell you that, you know, when you think back to your childhood, Guy, you're exposed to a lot of different things.
Long time ago.
Lacrosse was one thing that my dad introduced to my brother and myself, my brother Andy, he's my twin brother, that would not have come to us if it wasn't from him. Okay, my dad, that is. We grew up in New Jersey. We moved to Syracuse when we were in 6th grade in 1984. But my dad introduced the sport of lacrosse to us. It did not exist in New Jersey, okay, back then. And we moved in 84. He brought us 2 lacrosse sticks before we moved. And my brother and I fell in love with the game. It's something that we spent hundreds of hours throwing lacrosse balls, shooting with my dad in the backyard and in the driveway, I guess you call it.
Wall ball.
Wall ball. So that was my dad's gift to my brother and myself. So I went there my freshman year to Syracuse. And so you and I meet many years after that, right? And I'm told that here's a guy, great kid, great lacrosse player. I knew of him, number 29 in the orange and blue.
Right. And you're number 29 on your program, number 1 in your heart, Stephen Rehfuss.
So we meet this kid. My dad loved him. He had a scouting report on this kid. He loved him as a player.
All left.
We meet him. He graduates Syracuse. He's looking to come to New York. We bring him on the team. The rest is history. Now, we've been busting his chops now for a while.
But you know why? So just so we understand each other collectively, and so the audience understands, if we didn't love him, we wouldn't bust his chops.
That's true.
It's because we admire him so, and we have such affection that we feel empowered to do such. However, if somebody else were to cast aspersions at Stephen Rehfuss, I'll eviscerate that person.
That's
right. Follow?
All right, so
because he's under the protection of the Adami family.
So here's what we're going to do in this segment, here, people. Okay, so you're listening to this right now in the audio format. Okay, we're also going to extend it. We're going to do a longer bit. It's going to go on our YouTube. That's the RiskReversal Media YouTube channel.
Please subscribe at your favorite subscription.
All right, so here's what we're going to do in this little segment here. So just so you know, one of the very first guests of On the Tape was Paul Rabel.
Sure.
Paul Rabel was a legend, played at Johns Hopkins University, and he started with his brother, Mike Rabel, the Premier Lacrosse League, right? We had a great conference. That was more than 2 years ago, Guy. I think
it was. And you know what's amazing? For somebody that obviously does not follow the sport of lacrosse like you two, I actually watched the draft a couple of weeks. No, it was mesmerizing.
Yeah,
they did a fantastic job. So congrats to the Rabel brothers.
So Rabel's coming on Fast Money again. I think it's going to be his 3rd or 4th time. That's going to be on Thursday. By the time you're listening to this, Paul is going to be on the show. But what we thought we wanted to do right here is this weekend in Philadelphia, we are going to have the Division I Final Four. And we thought, who better to preview that, right, than Stephen Rehfuss?
Nobody. Stephen, welcome to the On the Tape podcast.
Thank you. That was quite the intro.
All right, so Stephen, what have you been doing with us for the last 2 years at RiskReversal Media? What's been your role here?
So I started interning as an analyst, as a research analyst in September of 21. And then I moved here officially at the end of April in 2022. And I've been here ever since. I work with you guys. I kind of help with all content, whether it be Market Call, OK Computer, On the Tape, researching guests, latest news. So been in person here with you, Dan, and Guy, when you come in.
Safe to say we could not have done this without him.
There's zero question about that.
That's not true.
When the obituary is written or whatever they call that about the risk, Stephen Rehfuss will be prominently featured in that. Right. But don't think that Stephen Rehfuss is just some bit player.
No.
You were a semifinalist for the highest award in men's lacrosse. Please speak to that.
Don't
look at me quizzically. I mean, there is an award that is given out every year to the top player in the game. You were a semifinalist for that award. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of players across the country who would love to win that award, yet you were one of the semifinalists. Speak to that. And who, by the way, won that year?
So that's the Thornton Trophy. The winner in 2021, I believe, was Jared Bernhardt from Maryland.
Great player.
Yes. They
Also
did.
plays. Do you know that isn't he playing in the NFL?
Yeah, Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah. So
Look at that.
my boy Rags, Dave Ragone, he is the OC. He is the offensive coordinator, and they have a lax guy on that squad. What position does he play?
I believe he's wide receiver.
Yeah. So he won that year. You were a semifinalist. You had a great career at Syracuse. Unfortunately, you had a COVID year, like 2020. They canceled that year. You guys were like number one in the league that year, weren't you?
Yeah, we were 5-0. We were number one in the country, but the bulk of our schedule was ahead of us, so it was cut short. But
all right, so let's talk about this. We have the Final Four coming up this year. Who is it? Let's frame it. I want to put your another guy from Syracuse who I love
Say it.
on the ESPN, Kark. Okay, let's put your Kark hat on right here. Let's game this out. We got 2 games on Saturday. They're in Philadelphia. What are they? Who are we expecting here? And let's get into it, man.
yeah, so Final Four is coming up at Lincoln Financial Field in Philly. First games are on Saturday. The first one's at noon. That's going to be between Duke and Penn State. Duke is the 1 seed in the tournament, and Penn State is the 5 seed in the tournament. Followed by that will be UVA versus Notre Dame at 2:30. So we have 3 ACC teams and 1 Big Ten team. Last year, the ACC was slighted by the NCAA committee, and only 1 team was in the tournament. so
Slighted.
they were.
Slighted.
I like that.
So Notre Dame came on really strong at the
Their
end of last year.
program has come a long way.
No, they have. But, I mean, this is a team that I think their first Final Four might have been in 2000, 2001. And since they've really been a mainstay, like in the top, right, like the top 5 of the Division I. Last year, they were coming on really hard. They did not make it into the NCAA tournament, let alone some people think that they would have been there on the Final Four.
Yeah, I think they definitely would have been on the Final Four and probably in the national championship game. They were the next best team after Maryland last year come May, so everyone was looking forward to that game. But
5 or 6 teams from the Ivies made it into the NCAA tournament. How many of them made it into the Final Four last year?
I believe Cornell and Princeton made it along
Not
with
bad. It's a
Rutgers.
good show.
I have a question for Stephen Rehfuss. Am I allowed to ask a question?
It's your podcast.
There were historic lacrosse schools for a long time. University of Maryland.
Yeah.
The aforementioned Syracuse. Yale was always sort of around. Princeton was UVA. And then something weird happened about 5 or 6 years ago. Schools that you never would have thought of. Denver.
Yeah.
Loyola. Schools seemingly out of nowhere came. And Michigan, their program. What has happened? Is the sport just sort of gaining traction across the United States because these predominant schools that are, by the way, all represented this weekend, ex-Penn State, there are a lot of schools sort of in the mix now.
Yeah, I think it starts with the youth. I think kids across the country are starting to play more and more. Even where I'm from, there are just new different youth leagues and different programs popping up each year. And I think then that's filtrating to the college ranks. I think when I was growing up, it was only a couple schools. You could basically predict who's going to be in the Final Four every year.
Well, in the 80s, okay, just so you know. So when I grew up, I
can speak 80s lacrosse, by the way.
No, I know you can.
Yeah,
but
I'm just
when
saying.
I moved to Syracuse in 84, Syracuse won their first championship in 1983. They went and they lost. They beat Hopkins. Then they lost the next year in 84. They lost to Hopkins. And then they beat in 87. I think that they won 87, 88, 89, right? Or something. I mean, like, so it was Syracuse, Hopkins, and Carolina were the only teams in the 80s that won championships, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then now the landscape has definitely changed. You have teams like Denver, who you said, that definitely helped with Bill Tierney, was the coach at Princeton for a long time, and he went out to Denver, so he's grown that program.
So all right, so step back. 1992, I'm on the Syracuse lacrosse team.
Of course you are.
Okay. We beat Johns Hopkins in the semifinals, okay? And it happened to be at University of Pennsylvania at the storied Franklin Field,
Sure.
okay? Then we're playing Princeton. We don't have a care in the world, okay? We're going to walk all the way through
Didn't
this.
happen.
Yeah. Princeton takes us to overtime. They win in the opening seconds of overtime. And Bill Tierney is now, all of a sudden, he goes on this tear. How many championships did Princeton win in the 90s?
I don't have the exact number of that, but a good amount.
So basically, I think they won 3 or 4. Okay, like in the 90s. So the pages turned. Syracuse and Hopkins are basically done, right? Carolina doesn't. They barely win in the 90s. So it's Princeton wins. Then you have teams like Duke come on, right? And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the sport is spreading like a weed across the country, right?
Definitely. I wouldn't say Syracuse was done since they won early 2000s. And
I like that pushback. Good job by Stephen Rehfuss.
In 2009. But yeah, now these programs are growing. You see a program like Michigan this year, which they're relatively new, but a lot of people have been waiting for them to come on for a while now. Obviously, a huge sports school and a big draw, and they play in the Big Ten.
So you think Big Ten? Do you think they're going to have like the next decade could be about the Big Ten? So we obviously had these teams that were classic, like Syracuse, Hopkins, Carolina, and then UVA got in the mix in the 90s. I think it was UVA, Princeton. They just like kind of ran away from it, and now all of a sudden we have Penn State this weekend, right? And so Maryland's in the Big Ten. Rutgers was in the Final Four last year. Michigan's going to be there again at some point.
And Hopkins is in the Big Ten now.
Oh, that's right.
So they used to not have a conference, but they joined, and they decided to join the Big Ten. So that's elevated them. And Hopkins is also back. They're in the quarterfinals this year after having a couple of down years. So that's another story.
I'd love to see Hop. Wouldn't you love to see
Hop? No. But I'm sure Paul's listening to this and saying, what do you mean no? No, I mean Hopkins is one of those schools. But let's sort of break down this weekend's game.
Let's do it.
I look at these games, and Duke to me is the best team in the country. I think they were number 1 ranked going in. They're playing a Penn State team that, you know what, good for them for being there, but this is a step up in class. This is like in horse racing where all of a sudden you go and step up in class and then you start to separate the wheat from the chaff. Are we going to separate the wheat from the chaff in the form of Duke just sort of running rampshod over the Nittany Lions of Penn State?
Yeah, so, I mean, Penn State, they are a good team. If you make it this far, you're definitely good. And a lot of these older guys, they made the Final Four in 2019. They had a very talented team that year, so they've been there. But Duke, obviously, they're the number 1 team right now. They have some of the best players in the country, probably spearheaded by the best player in the country, and Brendan O'Neill. He's a junior attackman. So Penn State's coming in at 11-4. Duke's coming in at 15-2. Penn State, they have not played an ACC team yet this year, so that'll be interesting to see. Duke's first Big Ten matchup was against Michigan, which is in the quarterfinals last weekend, which they won 15-8. Duke also missed the tournament last year, so they were kind of the team right behind Notre Dame, and their last Final Four appearance was in 2021, so their guys have also been to the Final Four. So I think the players to watch here are going to be Brendan O'Neill at attack, Andrew McAdory is also at attack, and then Jake Naso, he's really come along. He's their Fogo. He's first team All-American.
Hold on a second.
Right,
I know what that is. Fogo, for you listening for the first time, that would be face off, go off. In other words, your only job is to win a face off, and then once you win, you hightail it off the field. It's one of the most ridiculous things I've seen in sports, but apparently it's a thing in lacrosse. We'll talk about more of that later.
Yeah, but I mean, and we're going to talk about
Fogo.
We're going to talk about UVA's face-off guy. He's not a Fogo. I mean, that guy scored. He won outright. Okay, last week. In what was an awesome game versus Georgetown. It was kind of going back and forth a little bit, but literally, I think the score was 2-0 right out of the gate because the face-off guy wins the face-off, throws it down to the attack. They're up 2-0 off the 2 face-offs in like the first 30 seconds or something like that. But let's go to Penn State for 1 second here. They're coached by a guy named Jeff Tambroni. I know the Tambroni family. Jeff was a legend at the Hobart College where my brother played.
Hobart won national championships
Division III.
year after year after year. Then Georgetown said, who is this cat that's coaching at Hobart? So what they do? They hired him.
Dave Urich. You don't even
Look
know
at
this
me.
stuff. This is like old school sort of stuff. So they and Dave Urich put Georgetown lacrosse in Division I on the board.
Sure.
There. Yeah.
Then it fell on hard times, but that's neither here nor there.
So
because Georgetown's not playing this weekend.
Was a great player at Hobart. He was a great coach. I think he coached at Cornell for a while. Then went to Penn State. He's a great coach here. And again, we might be on the precipice of a team. You said they were in 19. They made it to the Final Four. Maybe Penn State is going to work themselves into a little bit,
or maybe not. Duke is a legendary lacrosse program, as you know.
Yeah.
Storied program. I'm actually good friends with Ned Crotty, who actually won that. How do you say that? Tewarton Award back in the day.
Del Barton kid?
Sure he is.
Obviously. All right.
By the way, he was a better hockey player. Like Jim Brown was a better lacrosse player than football.
Yeah.
Ned, who's listening right now, was a better hockey player than lacrosse.
All right. So Rehfuss, who wins this game and by how much?
I'm taking Duke. I think the biggest storyline for Penn State was that one of their top cover guys, he was injured versus Army last weekend. So Look to see them probably play more zone. They played some zone against Princeton in the first round, and that really stumped them. But I have Duke winning this game by at least 3 goals.
Wow. All right. So DraftKings has a -4 over the Penn State.
Stephen Rehfuss has spoken. So maybe you take Penn State in the goals, but Duke's going to cover. Now, this is a game that I think everybody's waiting for because these teams have played each other a couple times this year. That would be the aforementioned University of Virginia, the Cavaliers, the Who's against Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish. By the way, those brothers on Notre Dame, those guys are badass.
Taft guys.
They're what?
Taft guys.
Taft, the
Kavanaughs.
school. Yes.
Yeah.
They're pretty good.
Yes, they are. So Virginia's playing Notre Dame. UVA is coming in. They beat Notre Dame on March 25th, 15-10, and April 30th. They won 12-8. Both of those games were Notre Dame's lowest scoring games of the season, which has been the storyline and is kind of the storyline again leading into this game.
Like in lacrosse, again, regular season is what, 12 games or something like that.
Ish.
It's kind of hard to beat a team 3 times here, right? So, Notre Dame.
Oh, the old adage.
Yeah.
It's difficult to beat the same team 3 times in one year. I've heard that before. In the NFL, they talk about that.
Yeah, they do.
Lars Tiffany, they asked him about that yesterday. Lars Tiffany's the head coach at UVA. And there's an interview yesterday asking him about it. And he said, I've heard that, but can someone show me the statistics?
That's what I'm talking. So. We beat them twice. We're going to beat them for the 3rd time. I'm with you because you know what? I remember one year the Giants had beaten the Redskins twice in the regular season. This is football now.
Yeah, it is.
The Redskins when they were called the Redskins, by the way, so I can say that. And then the Giants were playing them in the playoffs and being, oh, my God, it's hard to beat the same team. You know what they did? They shut their ass out, Dan Nathan. So I like UVA to win. UVA is playing – they're a high-scoring team, which may be sort of thwarted a little bit by this Notre Dame defense. But you know what? I don't know about that. I like UVA in a 17-12 game. How's that?
Wow.
Write it down.
Okay.
Stephen?
Yes, I like UVA as well. Their tour finalist, Connor Schellenberger, he's been a little bit banged up all season. He's still had a great season. He's actually not even their leading points getter right now, but he looks like he's back to full health. He had 10 points last weekend against Georgetown. So look for him to come on pretty strong.
Wait a second. How many points do you have?
10.
10 points in a game.
In a game.
We're going to get into the PLL in a second, but this cat had 10 points in one game.
Yes.
Sounds like a lot to me.
And it wasn't his first time
Just
doing it
hold
this
that
season.
thought for a second and please continue.
Yes, so I have them winning. These guys also, they're 5th-year seniors. They've already won 2 national championships at Virginia, so they're going for their 3rd. I think this team is just built for May. They have a ton of depth.
Built for May.
Built from May.
Built for May.
I like that.
I like that, right?
Well, I mean, think about it, and he's
Seems
right
like
about
something that Kark might say on the
stop with the Kark. By the way, Georgetown, I think, started their season 0-3.
Yeah.
And people were questioning what was going on.
Yeah, but they played nobody.
Well, I'm just saying.
They played in the Big East. It was a disaster. He and I were talking about this.
So it looks like what it looks like, Dan, is we're setting up for a University of Virginia Duke final, which will be played when, Stephen?
That would be played on Monday.
So Memorial Day would be the finals, and that's going to be, in my opinion, a classic matchup. You can handicap that if you want. If you're asking me, I think yet again the University of Virginia will have a national championship team and a storied university. I mean, think about what they do on the baseball field, what they've done on the lacrosse pitch. I think that, what do you call it? Pitch.
Field, I'd say.
But their swim program,
Really?
out of control.
That's where you're going? Basketball's had some success.
It has.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, Stephen. Please continue.
Yeah, so UVA versus Duke is my national championship game prediction. So this will be their 3rd matchup if they do meet on Monday. Duke has won both the matchups this year. On March 31st, they won 16-14, and on April 15th, they won 15-14. Probably the biggest stat from this entire matchup is that Duke has won 18 consecutive regular season games against Virginia. They are 23-2 against UVA since 2005. So they've dominated that matchup. But the last time that they played in the tournament was in the Final Four in 2019, the year that UVA won, and UVA beat Duke in overtime 13-12. So I do have UVA winning here. I think their depth, their coaching staff, their pace of play, and just their overall experience that they have is going to push them over the edge.
All right. Well, I mean, there you have it. I mean, this is the
Stephen Rehfuss breaking it down.
Breaking it down here. I mean,
breaking it down much better than anybody on ESPN would be breaking it down. By the
those
way.
guys are great. I mean, listen, you know what? I got to give ESPN so much credit. We're going to talk about obviously the PLL right here. I mean, that's where you can watch all the Premier Lacrosse games going on. You know, like they have every game, right? Like, so it's going to be on TV live. It's going to be. I think they even had some games on ABC last summer, that sort of thing, and then they're putting them all on streaming after that. And ESPN. Literally, my dad has VHS tapes of the 1983 upset when Syracuse was, beat Hopkins, and it's literally was on ESPN back then. And so they've been with the game from the get-go.
Okay, so here you go. So I'm going to give you. So I grew up in Croton on the Hudson.
Yeah,
Steve, you may be familiar with that town because the town next to it is Yorktown. And when I was a kid, a wee lad, lacrosse. You looked at each other. What's this lacrosse thing? But every year, Yorktown would have 2-3 All-American. The Nelson twins, by the way, Dan, from Yorktown, that played
Not twins, Tim and Tom
brothers
Nelson.
That played at Syracuse.
Yeah, they did.
Now, from Croton, there was a gentleman named Clay Johnson. Clay went on to play at the University of Maryland. He put that program on the map, and then he went to Australia. And people from Australia will say that but for Clay Johnson, say it, Dan, what's a but for? There would be no lacrosse in Australia. Joe Vasta, who played at the Air Force Academy from Croton on the Hudson, was the all-time leading scorer in Division I men's lacrosse until about 15 or so years ago. And Fred Opie, a legend at Syracuse University, is also from Croton on the Hudson that scored the goal of the year, I believe in 1985, was on the George Michael sports machine, long stick defenseman, runs all the way downfield behind the back goal against Hopkins.
It was
Dan.
dope.
You may remember that. All from Croton on the Hudson. So don't tell me about lacrosse. Oh, and I'll throw a Brendan Glass at your ass, who was a 4-time All-American at the University of Massachusetts.
I didn't realize
storied high school lacrosse.
Pretty.
Back to you, Stephen.
Pretty good.
But Stephen plays in the PLL. Now, I watched that thing they did. They had
The draft.
No. I mentioned that already.
Oh, yeah.
But they had some ESPN thing on Paul Rabel.
Oh, yeah.
What was that thing
it was
called?
a movie.
It was a movie.
Fate of the Sport. We went to the premiere last year.
Fantastic.
It was awesome, yeah.
It really is. And now I'm going to ask you a question in a second, so get ready. But I'm watching this, and after one of the games, Paul Rabel, who's got no shirt on, he's a badass, he's ripped, he's giving out game balls.
And he gave one to Rabel.
And he gave one to Stephen Rehfuss.
He gave one.
He gave one to
Rehfuss.
Stephen Rehfuss. I'm like, that's Rehfuss.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's
your guy.
And he said how well you set up the offense. That was your freshman campaign. That was your first year, if I'm not mistaken.
So his rookie year, he was a top 50 in the league sort of thing. And we've talked, this is where I think a lot of our listeners know that we've talked about his, what we thought was a slightly disappointing sophomore campaign, right?
It typically is,
for whatever
though,
reason.
for a lot of people.
He came in with a head of steam. He had 5 years at Syracuse. You had a great career at Syracuse. You were a great contributor to the PLL Cannons your rookie year. Let's talk about last year. What happened, Stephen?
Yeah, I think we're all trying to forget last year. The Cannons, we were, I believe, 1-9. We won our
Wait a second.
first game
What
of
was
the
that?
year.
They were 1-9.
1-9.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We won our first game of the year.
And you had some of the best players in the world on that team.
Rabel was on the squad.
Rabel was not on the squad
last year. That
No,
may
but
have been part of the problem.
the one guy
Lyle
is
Thompson.
he's a storied lacrosse player.
Yeah, he's great.
1-9.
Yes.
What do you attribute that to?
Like I said, I think we're all trying to forget about it.
Oh, you're all trying to forget about it. You
and
just
move
put it
on.
in the
You know what?
rearview mirror.
One thing I'll say is, and I watched a lot of PLL last year. It's a great product, okay? And I'll just, the teams are really evenly matched. For the most part, right? And so, to your point, Guy, I know you have a problem with the face-off. Sometimes that face-off really does cause a problem. They have a 2-point shot, you know what I mean? So, for instance, there's a bunch of stuff there that's
gimmicky to me.
It is gimmicky, but I guess like I've seen games that in the first half look really close, really evenly matched. These are all exceptional athletes, and then all of a sudden there's a 6-goal lead, and one team's kind of pulling away with a couple, a long stick. These long sticks, when they get ahead of steam, they always shoot from 2, right? And they probably have pretty good success rate.
We call those guys the pole.
Yeah,
the pole.
Yeah, the pole. The pole's here. All right, so let's talk about
that expression.
This season here. It's the 5th season. It's a touring model, people. So if you haven't checked it out, all 8 teams travel to one city, okay? And they play how many 4 games, right?
Yeah, there'd be 4 games a weekend.
Good math skills there.
No, but they used to do
yeah,
more. They
I'm
used to
kidding
I know, there were
around.
a couple double headers or something. I don't know. It was kind of confusing here. Talk to us about this season here. Any big rule changes? Anything that you expect? Like last year, it was the Water Dogs who won. They were not expected to win at the start of the season. They caught ahead of steam in the playoffs and they won. What do we expect here in the PLL this year?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think every team has great players. If you even look back at our schedule last year, yeah, we're 1-9, but the amount of 1-goal games we had or just tight games we had, like we weren't getting blown out by teams. I think fast forwarding to this year, they did announce some rule changes. The biggest one, I think, so off the face-off now, it's a 32-second shot clock, which I think is going to help eliminate a dominant face-off man. So you can't really get your offense on right away. So basically, the D-middies and the poles that are on the face-off wings, I think they're going to have to basically go to goal right away. And it's just going to continue to make the game even faster than it already is. And then previewing the season, right now we head to training camp on Friday, May 26th in Albany, New York. And we are there for a week leading up to the first game, which is June 3rd, also in Albany, New York.
What goes on in training camp? I want to know. Is it like some hazing? Remember Brian's
So wait,
song?
all the teams are together.
Yeah.
All you guys are together. You all know each other.
No, they have legit rivalries. So the way the teams are set up with the touring model is like, yeah, it's not the Boston Cannons or the Baltimore this and that or whatever.
They're the Cannons.
But they have a lot of guys from different regions, like from similar regions and similar teams, right? So like you said to me, what's the team that's got all the Maryland guys or whatever?
The Whip
The
Snakes.
Whip Snakes
Yeah.
at Maryland.
So like
Pay
for instance,
attention.
but like
Cheapest
some
thing
of
you
you
can do.
guys like don't really like the Maryland guys, right? I'm just saying.
Oh, I
I mean
like
a little
that.
bit. I mean, so is there a little bit of rivalries here or something or no?
I don't have a problem with any Maryland
No,
guys,
see.
but people,
'Cause-
it is interesting at camp and every weekend because you're sometimes a guy from a different team could be on your flight.
Yeah.
You see people at the hotel. We'll all be in the dorms together, but we all have our own like separate wing area. But you still see people in the dining hall.
I love that.
All right, well there it is, people. You guys got to hear
Yeah,
from.
but before we leave, I just want to let this be known. If I had been aware of the sport of lacrosse, I would have been a remarkable crease defenseman.
Might have been.
I would have blown people up. I would have been a first-team All-American crease defenseman because I'm nasty as a son of a bitch.
Fair enough. Well,
Confident.
that's Guy
am
Adami,
confident.
master son of a bitch. Stephen Rehfuss of the PLL Cannons and our secret weapon on
Yes.
RiskReversal Media. There it is. All right, people. If you like this conversation, you want to hear more, you want to hear some updates of Stephen over the course of the summer, leave a comment. Give us some feedback because maybe this could become a thing.
No, it's not maybe. This will be a thing.
Fair enough.
We
All
will
right.
be speaking to Stephen Rehfuss throughout the season, which means there's going to be a point where he leaves us to go on these little road trips, these sojourns. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's on Fridays.
So we can do Stephen from the road. Maybe we should do something like that.
Fair enough, Stephen. You up for it?
Thanks for having me.
All right,
I appreciate it.
All right, man. Thanks.